The city was alive with noise, cars rushing by, horns echoing, and people walking quickly along the crowded sidewalks. It was a place where no one really looked at each other. Everyone was too busy with their own lives. But in the middle of this busy street, something unusual was about to happen. Something that would change lives forever. A tall man stepped out of a shining black car, his suit freshly pressed, his shoes polished, and his wristwatch worth more than most people's yearly earnings. He was a millionaire, successful in every sense of the word. Respected, envied, even feared by some, people often saw him as untouchable. A man of wealth who lived in a world far above their own. But today, fate had planned a different story for him. As he closed the car door and started walking, his eyes fell upon a corner of the street. There, sitting on the cold pavement, was a woman, her clothes torn, her hair messy, her face pale from hunger and struggle. Beside her were two small children, both holding onto her arms as if clinging to the last bit of hope they had left. One child looked no older than 4, the other perhaps 6, both with thin faces and tired eyes that told a story no child should ever have to live. The millionaire slowed his steps without realizing it. Something about that woman caught his attention in a way he couldn't explain. At first he thought it was just pity, the natural reaction to seeing such suffering right in front of him. But as he looked closer, his chest tightened. There was something about her face, hidden beneath dirt and exhaustion, that felt strangely familiar. He stood there for a moment, frozen. The traffic continued, people rushed past. No one seemed to notice the small family struggling on the side of the street. But he noticed, and he couldn't look away. The woman gently stroked her children's heads, whispering to them even though her own lips were dry and trembling. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't beg every passerby. She only held her children and tried to keep them calm. Her quiet strength, even in misery, struck him deeply. The millionaire felt a mix of emotions he hadn't felt in years. He had seen beggars before. He had given money before, but this was different. This wasn't a stranger, at least not completely. There was a memory tugging at him, a face from long ago. And the more he looked at her, the clearer it became. His heart started to race. He remembered a time from his youth, back when he had nothing, back when he too struggled to survive. There had been someone kind to him then, someone who had given him food when he was hungry, encouragement when he was hopeless. Could this woman be that very person? Now reduced to this life of begging, sitting on the street with 2 innocent children by her side, the thought shook him to the core. He tried to tell himself it couldn't be, that life couldn't be so cruel. But every passing second, every glance at her tired eyes confirmed what he feared. It was her. The woman who once had dreams, who once had laughter in her eyes, now sat on the street invisible to the world. The millionaire's steps grew heavier as he moved closer. He felt the weight of the past and the pain of the present pressing against him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a powerful man with money and influence. He felt like a helpless boy again, seeing kindness in its purest form, and realizing how life had turned the tables. He stopped a few feet away, his hands trembling slightly. The woman still hadn't noticed him. She was too focused on her children, trying to shield them from the cold wind. The millionaire's heart ached as he listened to the younger child whisper, "Mommy, I'm hungry." Her eyes closed for a moment. Her lips moved as if praying, and she hugged them tighter, even without food. She gave them the only thing she had left, her love. At that moment, the millionaire understood something. Wealth, cars, and power meant nothing compared to the quiet strength of a mother. The street continued to move as if nothing extraordinary was happening. But to him, it was as if time had stopped. The recognition was clear now. The woman on the street was someone he once owed his life to. And though she was covered in dust and despair, she was still the same soul who had once shined brightly in his memories. His breath grew heavy, his chest tightened, and one thought filled his mind. He could not walk away. Not this time, not from her, not from the children. Fate had brought him here for a reason, and though he didn't yet know what he would do, he knew one thing for certain: his life and hers were about to change forever. The woman finally looked up, her tired eyes meeting the man standing before her. For a second, she blinked in confusion, as if her mind could not believe what it was seeing. Then her lips parted slightly and a faint gasp escaped. It was as though the years melted away, and the memories of a different time returned all at once. The millionaire's heart thudded in his chest. He had been right, it was her. The very same girl who once shared her lunch with him when he was nothing. When he had been a poor student sitting alone with an empty stomach. The same girl who had spoken kind words when everyone else had mocked him. Her name rushed back into his mind like a song he had long forgotten, but could never truly erase. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The street noises faded, the footsteps of strangers blurred, and the world seemed to pause. It was just the two of them. Bound by a past that neither could ignore, she was no longer the cheerful young woman he remembered, but beneath the dirt and sorrow he could still see her, still feel the warmth of her soul. Her children tugged at her torn dress, whispering, "Oh, Mama." "Who is he?" The woman's voice trembled. He is someone I once knew." She lowered her eyes quickly, shame flooding her expression as though afraid of how he now saw her. She didn't want pity. She didn't want judgment. She only wanted her children safe. The millionaire took a step closer, his voice low but firm. "It's really you." His words were not of disbelief but of recognition, carrying both pain and relief. He saw the way her shoulders shook, the way she clutched her children tighter, as if holding on to the only anchors left in her broken world. Memories of the past rushed through him. Her laughter in the schoolyard, her small acts of kindness, her dreams of becoming something greater, and now, those dreams had been buried under years of hardship. The woman tried to smile, but it was weak. More of an apology than joy, she whispered. "You shouldn't see me like this," her voice cracked, and the words cut into him like a blade. He wanted to tell her she had nothing to be ashamed of, but the truth of her condition was too heavy to ignore. The millionaire looked around at the people walking past without a second glance, at the shop windows glowing with expensive goods that she could never afford, and then he looked back at her, a mother who had lost everything but still held her dignity. It was as though fate was reminding him of a debt he had never repaid. He remembered clearly now. There had been a day when he had almost given up. Hungry, hopeless, and sitting alone, he had thought about leaving school forever, but she had walked over with a smile, placed food in his hands, and told him, "Don't give up. You are meant for more." Those words had stayed with him, fueling the fire that carried him through struggles until he became the man he was today. Without her kindness, perhaps he would never have risen from the darkness. And now here she was, broken by life, unseen by the world, with two little ones depending on her. The millionaire's chest tightened as guilt and determination collided inside him. How had life turned so cruelly, that the very person who once gave him hope was now the one who needed saving? The woman lowered her head again, trying to hide her tears. "I never thought you would see me like this," she said softly. "I was someone once, but now I'm just a beggar." Her words echoed painfully in his mind. But to him, she was not just a beggar. She was a reminder of humanity, of kindness in its purest form. And in that moment, he knew he could never turn his back. The millionaire crouched down so that his eyes were level with hers. His expensive suit brushed against the dirty pavement, but he didn't care. What mattered was the person in front of him, the one who had unknowingly shaped his destiny. "You are not just a beggar," he said firmly, his voice steady. "You are someone I owe my life to." Her eyes widened, and the tears she had been holding back finally spilled onto her cheeks. The children looked at the man in confusion, not understanding the depth of his words, but the mother understood, and the realization struck her like lightning. Even after all these years, even after all her struggles, someone still remembered her kindness for the millionaire. The recognition was more than just seeing a familiar face. It was a call, a reminder that life was not only about wealth and power. It was about the bonds we make, the small acts of compassion that ripple across time. And as he stood there, looking at her fragile frame and the innocent children beside her, he knew that this encounter was not chance, it was destiny. The air around them seemed heavier, charged with the weight of unspoken words and forgotten memories. He could no longer see her as the world saw her, a beggar with two children. He saw her as she truly was, the girl who once gave light to his darkness. And though the years had taken much from her, they had not taken her spirit. The millionaire felt something awaken inside him, a fierce determination. This was not the end of her story, not if he had any power to change it, and he did. More than anyone else walking by that street, he had the power to rewrite the future. He would not let her fade into the shadows of misery. He owed her that much and more. The millionaire stood near the woman, but before speaking further, he allowed himself a moment of silence. He wanted to watch, to truly see her life as it was now, not just as a memory from the past. His heart told him that sometimes silence reveals more than words. He stepped back slightly, blending into the movement of the street, and observed her carefully. The woman didn't beg loudly like others he had seen before. She didn't stretch out her hands to every passerby. Instead, she sat quietly, with her children leaning against her, their little faces pressed into her arms. Her eyes scanned the ground more than the people, as if she had learned not to expect kindness anymore. The boy, the elder of the two, tugged at her sleeve, whispering something. She reached into her small worn bag and pulled out a piece of stale bread, broken into 2 halves. She gave one to him and the smaller piece to his younger sister. Keeping nothing for herself, the children ate slowly, but their hunger was clear in every bite. The millionaire's throat tightened as he saw this. He knew hunger, he remembered it. But seeing children go through it while their mother sacrificed every crumb was unbearable. The street around them buzzed with life. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they passed, never sparing a glance at the family. A businessman in a sharp suit dropped a coin without looking, as if throwing it away rather than giving. Some people turned their heads the other way, pretending not to see. To them she was invisible. But to the millionaire she was the only person in the world at that moment. He noticed how carefully she wrapped her children's shoulders with her old shawl when the wind grew cold. She shivered herself, but her hands moved first to protect them. Her lips whispered something again, and though he could not hear the words, he understood she was praying not for herself, but for them, even in despair. Her heart beat only for her children. The millionaire's memories rushed back again. He remembered when he was young, how he had sat alone after being mocked by others. It was this same girl who had placed her hand on his shoulder and told him he mattered. And now here she was, giving the same strength to her children. While no one in the world cared to notice, a woman from a nearby shop came out, glaring at the family. "Move away from here. You are scaring customers," she snapped harshly. The beggar mother lowered her head immediately, whispering an apology she didn't owe. She stood and guided her children a few feet away, not arguing, not resisting, just quietly obeying. The millionaire clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. How cruel people could be, to treat her as though she had no worth. He wanted to step forward then to reveal himself, but something made him hold back. He wanted to see how she carried herself under humiliation, and what he saw amazed him. She bent down to her children, stroked their hair, and smiled faintly. "Don't worry. We are fine," she whispered to them, her voice soft but steady. Even though her own dignity was crushed, she refused to let her children see her pain. That strength, that quiet courage, was something no wealth could ever buy. The millionaire's eyes stung with unshed tears. This woman, once full of laughter, had been broken by life, but she was still unshaken in spirit. She was teaching her children resilience without even knowing it. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was dignity. She chose not to scream or curse. She chose to endure for the sake of those little ones. As he continued watching, he saw another passerby throw a mocking glance and mutter, "Useless beggar." The words hit like stones, but she did not respond. She only tightened her arms around her children, her eyes fixed on the distance. The millionaire thought of the times she had once defended him in school when others called him names. Now no one stood for her. No one shielded her from cruelty, and that realization burned in his heart like fire. Minutes passed, but they felt heavy and long. The millionaire felt as though he had aged years in that short span of silence. He realized something powerful. Money may build empires, but it could not buy the strength he saw in her eyes, a strength born of love, of sacrifice, of silent endurance. He thought of the countless business meetings he had attended, the luxuries he owned, the respect he commanded. None of it felt as real as this moment, watching her fight a quiet battle for survival. The people around her couldn't see her worth, but he did. He saw not a beggar, but a mother, a warrior, and above all, the same person who had once saved him with nothing but kindness. His chest heaved as he stepped forward again, unable to remain just an observer anymore. The time for silence was over. He knew her story wasn't finished, and perhaps he had been brought there to write its next chapter. The millionaire straightened his shoulders, his heart pounding with determination. This was no accident. Fate had placed them in each other's path again, and he was ready to change her life, just as she once had changed his. The millionaire stood only a few steps away, but instead of speaking right away, he allowed himself to simply watch. Something told him that before asking questions, before offering help, he needed to see the truth of her life with his own eyes. Sometimes silence was more powerful than words. The woman adjusted her position on the cold pavement, shifting so her children could lean against her more comfortably. Her clothes were ragged, but her movements carried a gentle care. Every time the smaller child stirred, she brushed his hair back softly, her fingers trembling but tender. She whispered something low, words of comfort that melted into the noise of the city. The millionaire leaned slightly closer, straining to catch the tone, and though he could not hear the exact words, he felt the emotion behind them. It was the voice of a mother giving courage, even when she had none left for herself. A man passing by wrinkled his nose, muttering under his breath, "Another beggar with kids." The words fell like poison in the air, but the woman didn't respond. Her head dipped lower, but she did not argue. Instead, she pulled her children closer and kissed the top of their heads. She refused to let the cruelty of strangers reach them. The millionaire's jaw tightened, anger simmering in his chest. How blind people could be, walking past treasures of humanity without ever seeing them. The older child tugged gently at his mother's sleeve. "I'm still hungry," he whispered. She nodded slowly. Her eyes full of pain she tried to hide. From the folds of her small bag, she took out a piece of dry bread so old it looked hard as stone. She broke it into 3 pieces, 2 slightly larger, 1 very small. She gave the bigger parts to her children and quietly held the smallest crumb for herself. The millionaire's heart twisted as he saw her slip that crumb into her mouth. Pretending it was enough, it was not food, it was sacrifice disguised as survival. He had seen many things in his life, from business empires collapsing to rivals begging for mercy, but nothing struck him as deeply as this quiet act of love on a street corner. In his world, people fought over millions, over contracts, over pride. Here, a mother fought silently to keep 2 children alive with nothing but scraps and hope. The shopkeeper from the nearby store suddenly stormed out, her voice sharp like a blade. "You can't sit here. You're making the place look dirty," she snapped. Waving her hands, the woman flinched but quickly rose. Bowing her head in apology, she lifted her bag and guided her children a little further down the road. No argument, no anger, only silent obedience. The millionaire watched with disbelief. She had been humiliated. Yet she still managed to smile faintly at her children as if to say, "It's all right." He felt his fists curled tight at his sides. The world had treated her cruelly, yet she refused to pass that cruelty on to her children. Minutes ticked by, though each one felt heavier than gold in his heart. He watched her carefully arrange her children against the wall. Wrapping them in her worn shawl, the fabric was too thin to keep away the cold, yet she wrapped it tightly as if it were armor. Her own arms shivered, her lips turned pale. But she ignored her own suffering. Her every movement said the same thing. They come first. The millionaire's thoughts drifted back to long ago. He remembered sitting on a school bench, empty stomach growling, face burning with shame as others mocked him. And it was this same girl, this same woman who had placed food in his hand and told him not to give up. She had saved him then with words and kindness, and now she was the one needing saving. The contrast shook him to his core. Another group of pedestrians walked by, one of them laughing cruelly as he tossed a coin at the children. It landed on the ground, rolling near the boy's feet. The child picked it up slowly, his small fingers hesitant, as though ashamed to touch it. His mother gently took the coin from him and placed it aside. "We will eat something later," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears threatening her eyes. The millionaire could not bear it anymore. Her silence was not weakness. It was strength. Strength so great it made his own riches feel worthless. He realized that her quiet dignity was a shield stronger than any wall. She had nothing. No money, no home, no respect from strangers. Yet she carried herself with a grace that humbled him. She would rather bow her head than let her children see her anger. She would rather starve than take the food from their mouths. She had lost everything, yet she still gave everything she had left. Her love. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt tears sting his eyes. Not for himself, not for his struggles, but for her. The woman who had once been his light was now invisible to the world. But not to him, never to him. His silence ended there. He knew he couldn't simply stand by as a spectator any longer. The millionaire straightened his shoulders and stepped forward. The crowd around them blurred. The sounds of the city faded in his heart. One thought echoed louder than all the noise. It was time to act. It was time to rewrite her story, just as she had once rewritten his. The millionaire could no longer remain silent. Every second of watching her struggle only deepened the ache in his chest. He knew the time had come to step forward, to close the distance between their worlds. He walked slowly toward her, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. People turned their heads for a moment, curious why such a powerful man in a polished suit was moving toward a beggar woman on the street. But he ignored their stares. His eyes were fixed only on her, the woman he once knew, the woman life had broken. The woman looked up suddenly, sensing someone close. When her eyes met his, time seemed to stop. Her breath caught in her throat and her lips parted in disbelief. It was not the millionaire she saw. It was the boy from long ago, the boy she had once helped, standing before her now as a man. Her eyes widened, tears glistening instantly, as if all her years of suffering had suddenly collided with this moment. He crouched down to her level, his fine suit brushing against the dirt of the street. To him it did not matter. He wanted to look directly into her eyes, to erase the distance that society had built between them. Her children pressed closer to her, confused by the presence of a stranger who looked so powerful. The younger child whispered, "Mama, who is he?" The woman's voice trembled. He was someone I once knew." For a moment, neither of them spoke further. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air. Finally, the millionaire broke the silence, his voice soft but steady. "It's really you, isn't it?" he said, his eyes searching hers for confirmation. The woman swallowed hard, lowering her gaze as tears slid down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, "but I never wanted you to see me like this." The words pierced his heart. She was ashamed not of who she was, but of what life had forced her to become. But he saw beyond the torn clothes and tired face. He saw the same spirit, the same heart that had once shone so brightly. "Don't hide your face," he said firmly. "You were once the reason I believed in myself. You gave me strength when I had nothing, and now I see you here, still strong even when you think you are broken." Her lips trembled, and she shook her head. "Strong? No, I am only surviving." Her voice cracked, but he gently placed his hand near hers, not touching, but close enough to let her feel he was there. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "You still have the same courage I remember." The children looked back and forth between their mother and the stranger. They could not understand everything, but they felt something unusual in his presence, something protective, something kind. The younger child tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mama, he doesn't look angry, he looks different." The millionaire smiled faintly at the child, a warmth spreading across his face. For years, he had lived among people who only smiled at his money, not at his heart, but now, kneeling in front of two hungry children, he felt something real again. The woman tried to wipe her tears quickly, embarrassed. "I don't want pity," she whispered, her voice low. "I only want to keep them safe." Her honesty cut through the air like truth always does. The millionaire admired her even more for saying it. He shook his head slowly. "This is not pity. This is respect." His words startled her. Respect, something she had not felt from anyone in years. People had mocked her, ignored her, or scolded her, but no one had respected her. Now this man before her, who had everything, was telling her she still had worth. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide her tears from her children, but her shoulders shook, and the sobs she had held back for years finally spilled out. The millionaire let her cry, not rushing her, not interrupting. He knew sometimes tears were the only way to release years of pain. He stayed there, steady, like a silent shield beside her. When she finally lowered her hands, her eyes were red but calmer. She whispered, "Why are you here? Why did you stop?" The millionaire looked at her steadily and replied, "Because fate would not let me pass you by, because I could never forget you, and because I cannot walk away now that I've found you again." Her lips parted in shock, her heart racing at his words. For so long she had believed no one would ever remember her, that her existence had faded into nothing. But here was proof that her kindness had never been forgotten, and that truth gave her a flicker of hope she thought she had lost forever. The millionaire glanced at her children, their small eyes wide with innocence. He felt his chest tighten with determination. This was not just a reunion. This was the beginning of something greater. He had taken the first step, and there was no turning back. The world continued to rush around them, cars honking, people hurrying, life moving on. But in that moment, it felt as if the universe itself had paused. Two lives that had once touched were meeting again in the most unexpected way. And with that first step, the path toward change had begun. The woman sat quietly for a long moment, her hands trembling as she clutched her children. The millionaire waited patiently, his eyes gentle but steady, giving her the space to speak. He knew she carried years of pain inside her, and forcing the truth would only hurt more. At last she took a deep breath, and her voice broke the silence, soft but heavy with sorrow. "My life was not always like this," she whispered, her eyes staring into the distance as if she were watching old memories replay. "I once had a home, a family, and dreams just like anyone else." Her voice cracked as she continued. "But everything I had was taken from me piece by piece, until all that remained were these two little souls depending on me to survive." The millionaire leaned closer, his chest tightening. He had imagined she had suffered, but hearing the truth in her own words was far more painful than anything he expected. She looked down at her children, brushing a tear from her cheek, and went on, "I was married once to a good man, a kind man who worked hard to give us a simple life. We didn't have riches, but we had enough to laugh and to love. Then he fell ill. The sickness came suddenly and we had no money for doctors. I begged for help, but no one listened, and in a few short weeks, I lost him forever." Her voice trembled, and her children leaned into her arms as though feeling her grief. The millionaire's eyes burned, his fists tightening against his knees. He wanted to turn back time to undo her suffering, but all he could do now was listen. "After he was gone, I was left with debts I did not even know existed," she continued, her tone bitter with the memory. "His relatives came like vultures, taking everything, our small home, the little savings we had, even the clothes and furniture. They said it was their right, and I had no strength to fight them." She paused, closing her eyes, her body trembling as the memory weighed down on her. "I walked out of that house with nothing but these two children, and since then, life has been nothing but hunger, cold nights, and humiliation." Her lips quivered. "I looked for work, I begged for a chance, but no one wanted to hire a woman with two small mouths to feed. They saw me as a burden, not a worker." The millionaire's throat tightened, every word carving into his soul. He saw her not just as the girl he once knew, but as a mother who had endured storms greater than most could survive. Her dignity had been stripped away by greedy hands, by a society that judged her without mercy. She took another shaky breath and whispered, "I begged only when I had no other choice. I begged not for myself, but for them." She motioned to her children, who clung to her tightly. "They are innocent. They should not suffer for the cruelty of this world. So I sat on these streets, swallowing my shame, only so they could have a piece of bread each day." The millionaire's heart ached as her words poured out. He thought of his own rise, of how people had turned their backs on him too. Yet he had been lucky to climb out. But she had been thrown deeper into the pit with no rope to hold on to. And still she had not given up, still. She fought for her children's survival. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, "I prayed every night that someone would see me. Truly see me, not as dirt, not as shame, but as a mother trying to survive." Her voice dropped even lower, but no one ever stopped, no one ever cared. Until today, the millionaire could no longer hold back the tears in his own eyes. Her confession was not just a story of loss. It was a story of strength hidden in brokenness. He reached forward slowly, placing his hand gently over hers. Her body stiffened at first, but then she looked up, meeting his eyes. And for the first time in years, she saw compassion instead of judgment. "You should never feel ashamed," he said quietly, his voice trembling but firm. "You did not fail, the world failed you. And yet you still stand, you still fight. And that makes you stronger than anyone I have ever known." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Only silent tears flowed down her cheeks. Her children looked up at the man with wide eyes, sensing the weight of his words, sensing the change in the air. For the first time, they saw someone who didn't look at their mother with disgust, but with respect. The millionaire continued, his voice growing steadier. "I owe you more than you know. Long ago, when I was lost and hopeless, it was your kindness that gave me strength. You may have forgotten, but I never did, and now, fate has brought me here not to watch you suffer, but to make sure you rise again." Her eyes widened, shock and disbelief filling them. She shook her head faintly, whispering, "Why would you care for me now? After all these years?" The millionaire's gaze softened. "Because you once cared for me when no one else did, and because I cannot stand to see the one who once lifted me fall without lifting her back up." Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, her sobs quiet but deep. The millionaire stayed close, steady as a rock beside her storm. Her painful revelation had broken the walls she had built, and in that moment, Hope began to flicker again in her heart. For years, no one had truly listened to her. But now someone not only listened, he understood. And though she did not yet know what he would do, she felt for the first time in years that she was no longer invisible. The woman's story hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Every word she spoke echoed inside the millionaire's mind, carving deep marks into his heart. He could not erase her pain, but he knew he had the power to change her future. And in that moment, he made a decision so bold it would shock everyone who knew him. He straightened his back, his eyes locked on hers, steady and unwavering. "You will not stay on this street another day," he said firmly, his voice carrying a weight of authority that turned heads of strangers walking by. The woman blinked, startled, as if unsure she had heard him correctly. Her children looked up too, their little faces curious and hopeful. The millionaire leaned closer and repeated slowly, "You and your children will not suffer like this anymore." "Not while I am here," she shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. "No, you don't understand. I have nothing, nowhere to go, and I cannot take charity from you," she whispered, her hands tightening around her children. Her voice trembled as she added, "People give out of pity, but pity fades, and when it does, I will be back here again." The millionaire's jaw tightened, his expression turning more determined. "This is not pity," he said, his tone sharp and clear. "This is responsibility, this is gratitude. And this is respect." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he added softly, "Long ago, when I was invisible to the world, you were the only one who saw me. You gave me food when I had none. You gave me courage when I wanted to give up. Do you really think I could forget that?" The woman's lips parted, her eyes filling with disbelief. She remembered that day faintly, when she had handed a small piece of bread to a hopeless boy, never realizing it would shape his destiny. The millionaire reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. Within minutes, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its driver stepping out and waiting silently. The crowd around them began to whisper, surprised at the scene unfolding. It was rare to see a wealthy man kneeling on the street with a beggar woman. Rarer still to see him treating her with such respect. The woman looked at the car in shock, her body stiffening. "No, I cannot," she whispered, shaking her head. "This world has taken everything from me. I cannot trust that kindness still exists." Her words were sharp, but her eyes betrayed her longing, her desperate wish for a different life. The millionaire leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Trust me this one time, just as I once trusted you. Let me return what you gave me." Her children tugged at her arms, whispering excitedly, "Mama, is he really going to help us?" Their voices broke what little resistance she had left. She looked at their thin faces, their hopeful eyes, and her heart crumbled. How long had it been since they smiled with real hope? Since they believed tomorrow might be brighter? Slowly her tears fell and she nodded faintly, unable to speak. The millionaire stood tall again and extended his hand toward her. At first she hesitated, her fingers trembling, but then she placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, strong, and reassuring. In that simple gesture, a promise was made. He would not let her fall again. He guided her and the children toward the car, helping them inside as though they were honored guests. The people on the street stared in silence, some with confusion, others with awe. They had passed by this woman countless times without care, but now they watched as a powerful man treated her with dignity. It was a sight none of them would forget. Once inside the car, the woman sat stiffly. Still unsure if this was real, her children clutched the seats with wide eyes, marveling at the comfort they had never known. The millionaire sat across from them, his gaze calm but firm. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "From this moment on, your life will not be the same." The woman finally found her voice, whispering, "Why are you doing this for me? After all these years?" He looked at her with eyes full of both pain and determination. "Because I remember," he said simply, "and because I cannot allow the one who once gave me hope to live without it herself." Silence filled the car, but it was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of change. The woman's tears rolled freely now, not of shame but of release. Her children pressed against her side, smiling faintly for the first time in what felt like forever. The millionaire looked out the window, his mind set on the next steps. He knew his decision would raise questions, even criticism, but he did not care. He had made a choice that came not from wealth or power, but from the heart, a choice to rewrite a broken story, to honor a forgotten kindness, and in that choice, He felt more human, more alive than he had in all his years of success. The car drove away from the street corner where despair had lived for too long, and as it turned the corner, the millionaire whispered under his breath, a vow only he could hear. This is just the beginning. The car glided smoothly through the city streets, its polished frame reflecting lights from tall buildings inside. Silence filled the space, broken only by the quiet breathing of the children as they leaned against their mother. The woman sat stiffly, her eyes darting between the window and the man across from her. Still unsure if this was reality or a dream that might vanish at any second, the millionaire studied her carefully, his expression calm but serious. He had already made his decision, but now he needed to show her that it was not a passing whim. She had been failed too many times by promises that led nowhere. This time would be different. The car finally pulled up in front of a tall glass building, one of the headquarters of his companies. The woman's heart raced as she stared up at it, unable to imagine why he had brought her here. She held her children close, whispering, "Stay near me." Her hands trembled, but the millionaire's steady voice reassured her. "You are safe, trust me." As they entered the building, employees glanced up in shock. They were used to seeing their boss walk in with powerful figures, businessmen or wealthy investors, but today, he walked in with a frail woman in rags and 2 children clinging to her hands. Whispers spread quickly through the hall, but the millionaire ignored them. His steps purposeful and strong, he led her to his private office, a large room filled with polished wood, leather chairs, and wide windows that overlooked the city. She sat cautiously on the edge of a chair, her children pressing against her, their eyes wide in awe. For them, this office felt like another world. The millionaire leaned forward, his voice steady. "You will not live on the streets anymore. Not while I have the power to change it." Her eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. "No, I cannot accept this. I don't belong here. People will laugh. They will say I don't deserve it." Her voice broke. "I don't want my children to grow up believing they are charity." The millionaire's eyes softened, but his tone grew firm. "This is not charity. This is justice," he said, his words deliberate. "You once gave me something no one else gave me. Belief, kindness, hope, and I would not be who I am today without you. Now it is my turn, not out of pity, but out of honor, out of gratitude, and out of respect." The woman covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing silently. Her children looked up at her, sensing something important was happening even if they didn't fully understand. The millionaire reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the desk toward her. Inside were papers, employment documents, housing arrangements, and financial support plans already prepared. "I have already made arrangements," he explained. "From today you will have a home, a safe place for your children, and a job in this very company, one that suits your abilities and gives you dignity, not pity." The woman stared at the papers in disbelief, her hands trembling as she touched them. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice breaking. The millionaire leaned forward, his eyes unwavering. "Say yes," he replied simply. "Say yes to giving your children a future. Say yes to living with dignity again." Her tears fell freely now, dripping onto the papers as she nodded slowly. The children hugged her tightly, their small voices filled with joy. "Mama, does this mean we won't be hungry anymore? Does this mean we have a home?" The woman held them close, whispering, "Yes, yes, my loves, we finally have a chance." Word of the act spread quickly through the building, employees whispering in disbelief. Some were shocked, others were moved to tears, and a few even questioned why their powerful boss would do such a thing. But when they looked into his eyes, they saw not just a businessman, but a man who had chosen compassion over pride. For them, it was a lesson they would never forget. Later that day, the millionaire personally accompanied the woman and her children to a furnished apartment he had arranged. It was not a palace, but it was warm, safe, and filled with everything they needed. When the children stepped inside, they ran from room to room, their laughter echoing in the walls that had never known such joy. The woman stood still in the doorway, her tears falling again. She whispered, "I thought I had lost everything, but today, I realize kindness still exists." The millionaire placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You never lost everything," he said softly. "You carried your strength, your love, and your dignity through every storm, and that is why you deserve this new beginning." The night settled, and as the city lights glowed outside, The woman tucked her children into real beds for the first time in years. They smiled in their sleep, their faces peaceful, their little bodies warm. She sat by their side, her heart overflowing with emotions she could not put into words. From the window, she saw the millionaire leaving quietly, his figure illuminated by the streetlights. He did not wait for praise, he did not seek thanks. He only walked away knowing he had fulfilled a debt of the heart, and as she watched him disappear into the night, she whispered through her tears, "You have given me back more than a home. You have given me back my hope." The days that followed were unlike anything the woman had known in years. Each morning she woke not to the chill of a street corner but to the warmth of a home. Her children no longer stirred in hunger, their faces no longer hollow with despair. Instead, laughter filled the rooms, echoing like music she thought she had lost forever. The millionaire kept his promise. He arranged for the children to attend school, their new uniforms crisp, their eyes shining with pride as they carried their books. The woman stood at the doorway watching them leave each morning. Her heart swelling with gratitude, she whispered to herself, "This is what every mother dreams of." At the company, she began her new role. It was not an easy position handed out as charity, but a proper job with responsibility. She worked in administration, her skills slowly returning as confidence replaced the doubt she had carried for so long. Her colleagues, who had first whispered in curiosity, soon saw her determination and dignity. They treated her not as a beggar saved by luck, but as a woman of strength rebuilding her life. The millionaire often checked on her progress, not as a boss demanding results, but as a friend ensuring she was respected. He watched quietly from a distance sometimes, seeing how her smile returned day by day. For him, this was more rewarding than any contract or business deal he had ever closed. News of his act spread beyond the company. People talked in astonishment about how a wealthy man had lifted a beggar woman and her children from despair. Some doubted his motives, others criticized him, but most were moved. For many, it was a reminder that compassion could exist even in a world that often worshipped only wealth. The woman's relatives, the same ones who had abandoned her, heard the news too. Shame filled them as they realized the very person they had cast aside was now standing tall again. But she no longer looked back at them with bitterness. She had suffered enough pain to understand that anger was a chain she no longer wished to carry. Her focus was on her children and the future now blooming before them. One evening, weeks after her life had changed, she sat with her children at the dining table. The room was softly lit, and for the first time in years, there was more food than they could finish. The younger child looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes and whispered, "Mama, are we safe now?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded and said, "Yes, my loves, we are safe, and we will never go back to those streets again." The millionaire visited them later that evening, quietly without announcing himself with grandeur. The children ran to him with excitement, calling him uncle, their voices filled with joy. The woman stood near the doorway, her eyes soft with gratitude. She whispered, "I don't know how to thank you enough." He shook his head, his expression humble. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "This was never about what I could give, it was about honoring what you once gave me. Hope, when I had nothing." His words settled deep in her heart. For years, she had thought her small kindness to a hungry boy was forgotten, but now she realized it had planted a seed that grew into something extraordinary. As time passed, she became more than just an employee in his company. She became a symbol, a living reminder that dignity can be restored, that kindness never disappears. Her story spread quietly, inspiring others who had lost hope. People began to see beggars not as faceless burdens, but as human beings with untold stories. Her children grew stronger each day. They studied hard, their laughter ringing in their new school. Teachers praised their determination, often saying, "These children carry a light in their eyes," as if they know the value of every chance they've been given. The woman knew that light came from survival, from learning early that hope is the most powerful gift. The millionaire, too, found himself changed. He had lived for years surrounded by wealth, yet nothing had touched his soul as deeply as this act. He realized that true riches were not the numbers in his accounts, but the lives he could touch, and in giving her a new life, he had discovered a new purpose for his own. One morning, as the sun rose over the city, the woman stood by her window, her children playing behind her. She thought of the streets where she once sat invisible, of the nights filled with hunger and tears. Now, those memories no longer broke her. They strengthened her. She whispered softly, "I was once a beggar, but today, I am a mother with hope." And somewhere across the city, the millionaire smiled as he began another day. He carried no pride in his act, only peace in knowing he had honored the past and shaped a brighter future. For the world, it was a shocking story of compassion, but for the woman and her children, it was simply the beginning of a new life. A story that proved true wealth is not measured in gold or property, but in the kindness that can lift another soul from despair into dignity, and in that truth, both the millionaire and the woman had found their redemption. Months passed, and the woman's life continued to bloom like a flower once crushed beneath the weight of stones. Her days were no longer filled with fear of hunger or rejection, but with purpose and dignity. She woke each morning to prepare her children for school, dressed herself for work, and stepped into a world that now greeted her with respect. The streets that once knew her as a beggar now only knew her footsteps in passing. Strong and steady, the millionaire often watched from afar, never demanding recognition. He didn't help her so she would worship him. He helped because her kindness had once saved his life in ways no one else understood. But as he saw her grow stronger, he realized something important. Her story was bigger than both of them. It was not only about survival, it was about showing others that even a single act of kindness could ripple across years and change countless lives. One afternoon, the company held a large event to honor employees who had shown dedication and strength. To everyone's surprise, the millionaire asked the woman to stand on stage. She froze, her heart pounding, unsure why she, a newcomer, had been chosen. But when he looked at her with steady eyes, she slowly stepped forward. Her children watching proudly from the front row, the room grew silent as she stood before the crowd. Her voice trembled at first, but soon grew firm. "I was once invisible to the world," she said softly. "I was seen only as a beggar, someone unworthy, but today, I stand here not because I am extraordinary, but because someone believed in me when I had nothing left." She looked at the millionaire briefly, tears in her eyes before turning back to the crowd. "And I want you all to know this truth. Kindness is never wasted. What you give may one day return to you in ways you never imagined." The audience erupted in applause, some with tears in their eyes. Many employees had never heard such honesty spoken in their halls of wealth. The story spread beyond the company, reaching newspapers, television, and social media. People across the city began sharing the tale of the millionaire who lifted a beggar woman into dignity, and the woman who became a symbol of resilience and hope. The woman herself, though humbled by the attention, never let it change her heart. She still lived simply, guiding her children with love and reminding them every day, never forget where you came from, and never forget to lift others. Her children grew into compassionate souls, always offering a helping hand to those who struggled. They knew the value of a warm bed and a full meal, because they had once lived without both. One day, as the millionaire visited them quietly as he often did, the older child looked up at him and asked, "Why did you choose us out of so many?" The man smiled faintly, his voice warm but steady. "Because your mother once chose me, long ago when I had nothing. She gave me hope without expecting anything in return, and that single choice changed my life forever. Now it is my turn to honor that gift." The boy nodded slowly, the meaning sinking into his young mind. He whispered to his sister later, "One day we must do the same. One day we must help someone else the way he helped us." Their mother overheard, her eyes filling with tears, knowing that the legacy of kindness had already begun to take root in the next generation. Years would pass, but the story of that day on the street corner would never fade. People would continue to tell it as proof that wealth means little without compassion, and that hope can rise even from the darkest places. The millionaire found peace not in his fortune, but in seeing the ripple of change his decision had created. And the woman, once a beggar, became a quiet voice of inspiration for many who thought their lives were over. She often said to those who doubted their worth, "Do not let the world convince you that you are nothing. One act of kindness can open doors you never thought possible. I am living proof of that." Her words carried weight, because they were not spoken from theory, but from scars that had healed into strength. As she stood at her window one night, watching her children study by the lamp, she whispered softly, "This is my gift, not riches, not fame, but the chance to see them smile without fear." And across the city, the millionaire also looked out of his own window, smiling. smiling faintly as he thought of the chain of kindness that had begun years ago with a piece of bread. Neither of them needed more than that truth, that in giving hope, they had created a legacy far greater than wealth. Years passed and the seasons turned like pages in a book. The woman's children grew taller, their once hungry faces now bright with confidence and dreams. No longer did they walk the streets in torn clothes. No longer did they wonder where their next meal would come from. They carried school bags, held pencils in their hands, and spoke with the hope their mother had fought so hard to protect. The millionaire continued to stand quietly in the background of their lives. He was there at school events, there when the children achieved milestones. But he never demanded the spotlight. His presence was steady, like a guardian who watched over them from the shadows, ensuring the path before them stayed clear of the darkness he had once seen them suffer. The woman herself grew stronger each day. Her job became more than employment. It became her pride, a chance to show her worth to herself and to the world. She rose through her company, not because of favors, but because of her effort, her honesty and her resilience. People respected her not as the woman who was once a beggar, but as the woman who overcame everything. One evening, many years later, a celebration was held at the company. The millionaire, older now but still commanding respect, called her and her children onto the stage. By then, her children were nearly grown, standing tall and confident. The audience clapped as they approached, though few in the crowd truly knew the history that bound them together. The millionaire spoke, his voice calm but filled with emotion. Years ago I was nothing, I was lost. And a young girl gave me kindness that I never forgot. When fate brought her back into my life, I had the chance to honor that kindness, and today, I see the results standing before me. Not just her strength, but the strength of her children. This is proof that kindness never dies. It only grows, the audience applauded. Some moved to tears. The woman stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly, her heart filled with gratitude. She looked at him and whispered so only he could hear. "You gave me back my life, but more than that, you gave me the chance to give my children a future." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No," he whispered back. "You gave them the future by never giving up. I only reminded the world of your worth." Her children then stepped forward, their voices strong. The older one said, "My mother taught us to never forget the value of kindness, and he showed us that true power lies not in money, but in helping others," the younger added. "One day, we will do the same. We will help others the way you both helped us." The crowd erupted into applause once more. Not just for the millionaire, not just for the woman, but for the story they represented. It was more than a story of survival. It was a story of humanity, of compassion, and of how lives can change when one person decides to see another not as invisible, but as worthy. As the night ended and the celebration quieted, the woman sat with her children near the window of their home. She looked at them, no longer fragile, no longer frightened, and whispered, "We have come full circle, my loves, from the cold streets to the warmth of hope, and now it is our turn to give to others." Her children nodded, their eyes shining with determination. The millionaire, sitting alone in his study that same night, thought back to the first day he saw her again, sitting on the pavement with her children. He remembered the ache in his chest, the decision he made, and the life that unfolded because of it. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "This was my greatest investment. Not in business, not in wealth, but in people." Years later, the woman's children kept their promise. One became a teacher, guiding children who came from poverty, reminding them that their circumstances did not define their destiny. The other worked with charities, building shelters for families who had been cast aside by society. Every act they did carried the echo of their past, the lessons of their mother, and the kindness of a man who once chose to stop on a crowded street. And so the story lived on, not as a tale of pity, but as a legacy of hope. The woman who was once invisible became a beacon of inspiration. The millionaire who once felt untouchable became remembered not for his wealth, but for his compassion, and together their lives proved one timeless truth: that even in a world full of cruelty, one act of kindness can ripple through time, changing not just one life but generations to come.